Hi, Andy.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Hi, guys. So this morning we're going to be talking about, oh, sorry. Someone talking to me and I shut it down? Talk. No? Okay, this morning we are going to be looking at the Holocaust. So if you could grab your sheets from your package about the Holocaust, that would be fantastic. So naturally, this is a really heavy topic, and we may end up using our entire hour by logging out and logging back in, because even just to give this a 1 hour feels like we are diminishing the significance somehow, but then to pop that down to 40 minutes feels like we're really ripping off ourselves from discovering what and why. Okay, so it looks like most of you have your notes there. I do want to encourage you as both young historians and word nerds to be reading lots. I know it's hard with school and you're sitting a lot anyway, so I get it. And TV is just way more interesting and engaging at times than a book. But I want to encourage you be reading. And I've got some books. If anything I mention, you say, hey, can you send that home over the summer? I'd love to read that. I would love for you to read this. So here's another one. It's called Train in Winter, A Train in Winter. And it's all about some French women who were part of the resistance movement in France during the German occupation. It's harrowing. It's horrible. Fascinating, and I think it's really necessary that we understand that kind of thing, and maybe what will be required of us at some point. So always just want to push some good books. Clara's War is a good one. I left so many of my recommendations at school kind of on my shelf there. So Clara's War is a really good one. It's about a young woman who, with her family, basically lives in a root cellar for 18 months. So they didn't know, of course, when they went down there that it would be 18 months. And I can't even wrap my head around, like, they couldn't stand up. They could not, like, it was like a crawl space underneath, fascinating, underneath a Nazi's floor, who was pretending to be anti-Jewish, and he would have like his SS friends over while they are hiding underneath the floor, so that if someone sneezed or coughed, their cover would have been totally blown. He would say these horrible things about Jews because that's what he needed to in order to keep this facade. Anyway, fascinating. It's called Clara's War. Happy to lend that out. I just want to encourage you to be reading great biographies about people who survived and how they survived. And so that's all I'll say about that. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Holocaust. Because I'm an English and history teacher, I always love to get our terms straight as we launch into something. So when we talk about the Holocaust, what has that come to mean? Just take your microphone off. We're an intimate bunch here, and I love that you guys keep showing up. It's amazing, and thank you. Just take your mic off. When we talk about the Holocaust, it's come to only mean one thing, and what does it mean?
The mass killing of the Jews in World War II.
Excellent. Thanks, Ryan. Exactly. So we need to know that before World War II, there was such a word as Holocaust, and it was used for a variety of things. But one of the things it was used for, it comes from the Greek word hollow, Holo, which means whole. So if you think of whole, wholesome, holistic, that's that word from the Greek whole. Costos, Kaustos, costos. So think of caustic, or even those warnings of things that can burn your skin, that they have like that skeleton hand, caustic liquids. So costos means to burn. So if you put those together, it means the whole thing gets burned up. And it was used to describe when Jewish people would sacrifice an offering to God and the whole thing was burned up. Nothing was left. So when you think about the weight of that term now being applied to what happened to Jewish people because of Hitler's agenda in World War II, it kind of gives another layer to the meaning of that word Holocaust. So like the whole thing's burned up. It's almost an annihilation. The best statistics we have talk about like 2/3 of all Jews in Europe were killed. 2/3. If you even just think of 2/3 of St. Thomas, like to every two houses you might walk past, people are annihilated, and then that third house, people survive. So we're going to talk about the different stages of how this could come to be, and why, and where we're Canadians, where we're Americans, where we're British and French while this is happening. And so I'm just going to start sharing my screen here, and we're going to work through those blanks. Not everything is in the blanks. All the blanks will be filled in. So there are words for all those blanks, but there will be significant things that we discuss that aren't there. So just make a note in your margins if there's things of interest or significance and you think, oh, this sounds like a pretty significant idea, please just fill it into your blanks as we go, or sorry, fill it in on the side. So there's 4 stages of isolation that historians looking back can sort of pinpoint. These were not, Hitler did not plan these from the beginning. He was making it up as he went along, and in some degree, he was wondering how much he would be able to get away with. So this was not, he did not have 4 stages at the beginning. This kind of morphed as he took over countries. He was allowed to take over countries. There was no resistance to this. And then, oh, shoot, when I took over, Belgium, it's got a lot of Jews. Now what am I going to do? So it was sort of this make it up as he went along. We can see by this cartoon the way that sort of the ideal Aryan was promoted and how the racism is evident in how Jewish people are promoted. So overweight, ugly, balding, conniving, greedy. He's got a briefcase probably full of money, probably full of this guy's money. Just this whole way of showing how Jewish people are the enemy is evident right here when we see these kind of political cartoons that were everywhere. So we have talked through Merchant of Venice and a little bit through our history course already that long before Hitler came to power, Jews experienced discrimination in Germany and all over the place, actually. So we saw that going back to Shakespeare's time in how Shylock is presented. So this is not a new thing to pin on the Jews the bubonic plague. Okay, so they're spreading it somehow because we talked about they weren't getting sick at the same rates as everyone else. So they must be collaborating and spreading this in some way, when really we can look back to see, oh, it's part of their dietary kosher laws that God had given them, that and their hand washing, why they weren't getting sick at the same rates as everyone else. In the aftermath of World War One, there were many Germans looking for someone to blame. That's a natural thing in all of us, is to want to pin the blame on someone when things go wrong or horribly wrong. And so there comes to be this growing sentiment that the Jews are to blame. So the Nazi movement is gaining strength in the early 1930s. And these anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic feelings in Germany are put forward to promote the Nazi agenda. So let's create a common enemy. Let's make it the Jews. And let's talk this up. So Jewish people, along with Slavic or Slavs, Poles, Roma, mentally disabled. So Roma is sometimes another word for gypsy, mentally disabled, and a host of others that the Nazis deem as less than ideal, are targeted and blamed for Germany's problems. And then we see them portrayed in cartoons and other posters as being subhuman. So they're dehumanized. Here is an actual poster, and it says, the translation is, Jews are our misfortune. So this is 1923. So if we like pause for a minute and think of Canada, we think of kind of like the flappers, and prosperity is starting to well up in Canada again. People are getting jobs who didn't have jobs initially. The Spanish flu has run its course. There is a general sense of some prosperity in Canada. In Germany, remember, they're wheeling wheelbarrows of money to the bakers to buy a loaf of bread. So we need to keep those sort of contrasts in mind. So they're looking for a target, an enemy. How did this happen? Why did this happen? And the Nazis as a political party are gaining momentum because they're able to pin it on someone that has been suspect for centuries anyway. It's easy, it's an easy target. It's kind of like Blacks would be in the United States at this time. They're the problem. It's easy. Everyone kind of leans toward that anyway. And then here, just shocking for us, or hopefully it's shocking, 60,000 marks is what this person with genetic defects cost the community during his lifetime. Fellow German, that's your money too. So in advertising how much it costs for a mentally challenged person, how much resources or money is invested in them over the course of their life, what is the implied meaning there? What is the takeaway from a poster like this?
They're not worth it because they cost too much.
Right. So you contribute nothing. You're just a drain on society. The next logical step, which they haven't made in the poster, but the next logical step is, well, if we could get rid of this drain on our economy, it would be better, right? There would be more money for the people who contribute something to society. And as believers, hopefully we are shocked by this, and also questioning how Christians in Germany could accept this, how this kind of poster, either of these, could be okay, and how German Christians could get on board with this. Hopefully we're starting to ask those kinds of questions. So here are our 4 stages of isolation. Again, Hitler did not think of this in a logical way. This is just what happens as we look back as historians and can kind of see the progression. So the first stage is the stripping of rights of Jews. The second stage is segregation. Ooh, sound like the Americans and how they dealt with Blacks? It should. Stage 3, concentration camps, and 4, extermination camps. Okay, so thankfully in the United States, their segregation sort of ended at number 2 here and did not go on to concentration and extermination camps. So the first stage, stripping of rights. I want you to know that like almost from the moment Hitler comes to power, January 30th, 1933, if you don't know that date, that's a good date for you to know. January 30th, 1933, Hitler comes to power. Hitler and the Nazis are elected, come to power, and he begins almost immediately to begin to put into law things that would limit Jewish freedom. So even before the Nuremberg laws, he has instituted specific things to begin. What he's hopeful of actually at this point is that they'll just leave. If he makes it so unpleasant for them, they'll just leave Germany. Like that is what he's hoping for. So Nuremberg was like a Nazi party getaway. It was held as a party rally for those kind of uppity people in the party. And at Nuremberg, they held a rally and then they begin to pass these laws systematically. Easy. Remember, when you burn down parliament, it becomes easy to pass laws because you have no legal opposition to your laws. So the first thing that they pass would be that citizens' rights are stripped. So as a Jewish person, your rights are stripped. You're not really a citizen of Germany anymore, and you don't have the rights and privileges of citizenship. Employment is limited or denied. The professions you are allowed to take part in, we see that Jewish doctors are only allowed to practice medicine on other doctors. Jewish lawyers are not allowed to practice at all. So we see some of those top educated people in German society who are Jewish are now no longer or constricted to just specific their own people they're allowed to practice on or not allowed to practice at all. So we see Jews are banned from schools and universities. What is the implication on a generation that is banned, a people group and a generation that is banned from schools and universities? Again, you can think about Blacks in the US. When they were not allowed to read, when they were slaves, were not allowed to go to school. What is the long-term implication of that? What are you doing?
Like that their people in the future won't be as educated. So kind of like the same thing like with the natives and
Okay,
with the blacks.
yeah,
Kind of like
good.
in every race.
Good connection, Joey. So when you limit someone's education and they can't read things for themselves, what problems start to crop up? Can I hear from Ryan? What do you think?
They're unable to fight for their rights.
Awesome. Right. You might not even know your rights because you can't read. Right. So you become gullible and you become preyed on is really what I think what the keys when you strip away school and higher education and the ability to learn and read, you're forcing that particular people group to not be able to be aware or fight for their rights. So that's a very planned out move on behalf of Hitler and the Nazis, obviously believing that if you eliminate their ability to ask questions, to think deeply about things, then you're just going to have lemmings who agree with or are forced to agree with everything you say. The fourth point here is they're forced to carry identification cards. I think it's by 1938, 1939, could be 1939, like really everyone has to carry identification cards. But what's fascinating to me about this as I was researching this is the Germans forced Jewish people to have like Jew stamped in red on their identification card. And they also gave them a middle name that was Jewish if they didn't have a Jewish middle name. So basically it was so that any German officer could see the identification card, see it stamped red. It was like for dummies. How to identify a Jew for dummies. It was stamped red with Jew on it. And if you didn't have a Jewish, like an observably Jewish middle name, you were given one. So I think I know it was Sarah for women, and it was Israel for men. Okay, so literally Jewish identification card for dummies. And then that would prohibit you from entering certain places, institutions, from being out past your curfew. Everyone, by the time World War II starts, has an identification card. Everyone does. But Jewish identification cards prohibit them from being in certain places. And as we begin to see them herded into ghettos, they can't be outside the ghetto at a certain time or without an additional paper that says, I'm allowed to be outside this ghetto. So that's what those identification cards get to be really scary, because you can't have things, can't be places if you are a Jew in this time. Another stripping of their rights, forced to wear the yellow armband or yellow Star of David. Depending on where you are, it's either a yellow armband or yellow Star of David, identifying, again, for dummies, I'm a Jew. So easy to recognize, oh, you can't be here. Or, oh, it's past 8 o'clock, you can't be out. Jewish places of worship are destroyed. We're going to see that when we look at Kristallnacht particularly, but it's starting. So here is the Nuremberg laws. And this is a really specific, it's all in German, but I looked it up. It's really specific. If you have one grandparent who is Jewish, like this is what you are Jewish, right? Like this is how it all plays out, whether you're okay or whether you're not okay. Okay, so here we have Jewish people. Some of the other Nuremberg laws. Okay, I'll just leave it on this screen for a second. So in September 1935, there's a term called racial infamy. And this is if you marry someone with Jewish blood, or if you have sex with someone with Jewish blood. So Jewish blood becomes someone with 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents. So if you think about your grandparents, if 3 of them are Dutch, then you're Dutch, right? If you think about how this plays out, if they are Jewish, even if they've converted to Christianity and they're like, hey, we don't really see ourselves as Jewish, we see ourselves as Christian, or we see ourselves as German. Again, if you've been in a place for 3 generations, you don't necessarily still consider yourself the thing that you came from. So that racial infamy becomes a criminal offense, criminal, not just you can be sued or you can be fined. It becomes a criminal offense that you can be jailed for. Okay, so they begin classifying. Some people were Roman Catholic priests. We had nuns, we had Protestant ministers. They're Jewish now under these regulations because they have 3 grandparents who are Jewish. Even if those grandparents don't even identify themselves as Jewish, but as Christian or Catholic. So this is, I just want you to know how these Nuremberg laws begin to play out. By October 18th, you need to obtain, in order to get married, there is a law for protection of hereditary health for the German people. So that's in quotes, hereditary health. And it requires all people wanting to get married to obtain a public health certificate of fitness to marry. And of course, such certificates are going to be refused to Jews, anyone suffering from a hereditary illness. So think again of your parents or family. If you have a hereditary illness, you would not be allowed to marry because there is this desire to begin creating the perfect Aryan race. So we don't want anything in this gene pool like diabetes or muscular dystrophy, scoliosis. We don't want anything like that, a hereditary disease that's going to muddy these waters, this perfect gene pool. So you can't get married. If you have a disease, Down syndrome, or anything like that, or if you're Jewish. Then in November, we see these like a broadening out to anyone who is racially suspect. That's a great broad term for the Nazis to be able to put anyone in that category of racially suspect. So this is again where we see gypsies, Black people, and their offspring being denied just being allowed to get married. Okay. So those are some of the Nuremberg laws that I wanted to highlight for us. Any questions about Nuremberg laws? Okay, so back to your handout, discrimination becomes official. Nazis begin to be seen as the liberators from the enemy within. Remember when we talked about blame for World War I, we had these images of stabbed in the back, Jewish people, caricatures of Jewish people holding like this knife, that they are the problem. So if they're the problem, Nazis are the saviors. So the Nazis use hatred as a tool to manipulate and control the German people. Anyone who opposes them will be eliminated. Okay, Kristallnacht, just literal translation is night of the broken glass. So to kind of get a context for this, we need to understand that in 1938, I have a little more information on this. So a young man named Herschel Grinspan shoots a low-level German diplomat in Paris. So this is a German diplomat he sent from Germany to represent Germany in Paris. And he shoots him because of his despair over the fate of his parents, whom the Nazi regime has expelled from Germany to Poland. Okay, so this is just a young man, not much older than you. He's 17, he's frustrated and doesn't see any other way. So he shoots a low-level German diplomat. And the Nazis exploit this. So this is, yeah, it's just a major, they blow this out of proportion. It's not like the shooting of the chancellor or anything like that. This is, it's not right. But it's a singular attack. It's a young man. They blow it out of proportion by saying this is a conspiracy of Jewish people. Look, they're going to annihilate us or they're going to attack us. So we need to be ready and we need to in some way put them in their place. So this singular attack of one young man's frustration and despair and what he does with that, the Nazis exploit that to be a conspiracy of all Jewish people to take over Germany. And so that in some way gives them the platform to attack and arrest and destroy the synagogues and the businesses of German people. So there is this planned attack of Kristallnacht where police officers are said, do not arrest anyone who is destroying Jewish property, and firefighters do not respond to fires on this night regarding Jewish homes, property, or synagogues. That literally happened. They were instructed to not respond. Okay, so again, I've got some good stuff for Kristallnacht, and I just want to make sure that I am covering that. Okay, so it is November 9th, 1938. So we've jumped a bunch of years from that 1935 Nuremberg laws. We're now 1938. We're still almost a full year from war being declared. The Munich Pact has just been signed. Think of Chamberlain, think of those images you want in your mind. Chamberlain really excited about this pact where Hitler has promised to not invade any more countries. So Czechoslovakia was his last one. He promises. So I just want you to think about things in context, sort of chronologically. The Allies think we're good because in September, he has signed the Munich Pact, so we're good, Hitler's promise. And then these things are happening within Germany in a concerted way to make it so unpleasant for the Jews that they just leave. Okay. So the American, I just have a headline from the American press. They do cover, so Americans, Canadians, British, French do know about Kristallnacht, and they know about it like the next day. So they still have reporters in Germany wiring back, telegramming this stuff back so that we know about this shortly after it happens. And President Roosevelt denounces this anti-Semitic attack. So it's known to be just Jewish places, businesses, synagogues, and homes are destroyed. Like there's no question at this point, this is known. And so President Roosevelt says, I myself could scarcely believe that such things could occur in a 20th century civilization. And the president recalls the US ambassador to Germany. So that in diplomatic terms is seen as your first step to, we're not happy with you. You recall your ambassador, you release a statement that says this is appalling. What is actually appalling though is the radio silence from so many other countries. And if we think about it, like the League of Nations, as Hitler is taking over these countries, it's kind of like saying, we're not happy with you, you better be careful, we're watching you, but doing nothing else. So we're saying those things, we being the allies are saying, we're not happy with you, we're recalling our ambassadors, but there's no political or economic ramifications for what Hitler does to the Jews here. And we might begin to connect the dots that maybe it's not that significant to us as the Allies. Maybe we're not that appalled by what's going on. So we say we're appalled, but when it comes to drawing some harsher lines and giving Germany some ultimatums, that just doesn't happen over this flagrant attack on Jewish people. Let's stop here just so we can restart our time. Again, I did warn you, this is probably going to be a full hour seminar. So I am going to end here, end the meeting, and I would ask you to just jump back in really shortly as you've been so good to do. Okay, so see you in a couple minutes here.